Welcome back. Last week we talked a lot about all the items that you needed and what was required to actually get a functioning Raspberry Pi set up.
And we also promised you that we were going to show you exactly how to set up a Raspberry Pi from scratch. And we're going to do that in just a moment. So last week we went over the parts for the Raspberry Pi. What parts did we need? This week we're actually going to start getting this Raspberry Pi set up. But let's recap those parts real quick just to make sure we have everything we need. The first thing we need is the actual Raspberry Pi. Raspberry Pi 3 Model B is the device that we're working with. Okay. We also have the power supply that we'll also need to power the device.
We have our case.
We also have a micro, you can barely see this, but it's a micro SD card for the operating system. Okay. We have the mouse and keyboard. Thanks, Tim, for helping out with that. We have
our HDMI cable for connecting video out.
Okay. And then we have the screws for the case. You can't see them. They're itty bitty, but they're right there.
And not all cases have screws that are necessary. Some of them just use clips or retention clips like that or something. So, but if it has screws, you probably want to use them.
So I think the first thing that I'm going to want to do is we want to go ahead and put this Pi together in its case. We want to get this thing protected. Normally, if you're working with electronics, you really should be grounded.
Always safety first.
Yeah, safety first, and protecting the device. You know, little shocks to these small components could actually fry them out. Little electrostatic shocks. But
can sour the pie.
It can sour the pie, absolutely. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and put this together. I'm going to take the Raspberry Pi and I'm going to place it inside the base of the case. Yeah, you like what I did there?
Get your screws so I can be your assistant here.
And sometimes it's a little hard, so you might need to use like a little screwdriver or something like that to kind of pull those little things out.
Yeah, this particular case has little teeth, notched teeth. Here's your first screw.
So then we're going to go ahead and screw that in. Don't want to make it too tight. I mean, it is plastic. You can strip it out.
But you want to have a snug fit.
Well, and it's also helpful to, if you want, to have a magnetic screwdriver so that the screws don't fall in between these little spaces in between the Pi and the case.
So annoying. Yeah.
And then you're just playing this whole. Oh, let me knock that out. So now I'm going to add the last couple screws into the Pi. Which, in a real Pi, you really don't want to add screws. That's probably not a good thing. Tim, what's next?
Well, let's put the top part of that clamshell on.
Oh, don't go that way. So it just kind of snaps together, right?
Yep.
Bam.
And we're back reassembled.
We have a fully protected Pi.
Excellent. ESD protected. And I wanted to illustrate while we had it together, you know, it had those cutouts for the ports. Those are nicely aligned so that you can still fit everything in there. But also we have some ventilation on the back here, kind of hard to see, for letting the air flow. And there's some nice gap beneath it so the air can flow through there. Because this guy, if it gets exercised very strongly, will warm up a little bit and can get warm. You generally won't overheat, but it's good to keep it cool as possible. And also the cutouts for your front ports as well. So I guess the next thing, let's put that SD card in there, right?
Oh, yeah, sure.
So we have an operating system.
We have the micro SD card. you want to kind of get the teeth facing up in this particular case, I believe. That's the correct way. All right, we got it in there. And as I said before, this particular case is kind of hard to pull it back out. So once you get it in there,
you're good.
You're good to go.
And then since we're using a wireless mouse and keyboard here with that Logitech harmonized Harmony receiver.
Hold that a little closer to camera.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's got the Logitech logo there, and you'll see that little logo for the unifying receiver that they have. We'll plug that in any one of the free USB ports. So that's plugged in.
Cool.
And let's see,
so
we need
now
power.
You got your mouse, your keyboard connected.
Yes.
We need power.
So you can go and plug that in. Obviously, we're not going to plug it into a strip or anything, but you can see how it plugs in.
It would go into the power port. It's right next to the HDMI port. Okay. So you just kind of plug that sucker in the right way. Okay.
What is it with USB? Always the wrong way?
It's always the wrong way. It can go one of two ways.
Yeah, only one. And the other nice thing about this Pi is every port on here that you're going to plug something in is keyed. Every single port. So no force is required to plug anything in. If it feels like you're having to apply a lot of force to get it to plug in, something's wrong.
You're
check your connections, check your cables. Yeah. That's a big gotcha with a lot of electronics. People will break stuff off thinking that it has to be forced in.
Yep. So the next thing we want to do is we want to plug in the HDMI cable into the Pi. Okay. And that's pretty simply done. Just plug it into the one port that's available for it. And then right now we have our Pi, the hardware is actually put together and we're ready to run over to the computer and start downloading some software and getting this thing set up.
Now, keep in mind, there are some additional steps that might be necessary for you related to your case, related to expansions or extensions that you might plug into the device.
Depending on what kit you got.
Exactly.
Right?
If you've got a kit, it could have additional hardware. But generally, I would start with this basic setup first and verify your basic stuff is all working and as expected before you start adding other hardware into the mix. That'll keep you from having any difficulties related to that additional hardware that might require configuration or software in order to function.
Okay, great. So if you've had any issues setting this up, the hardware and whatnot, please let us know in the comments below and we'll be glad to answer any questions you might have. We're going to go ahead and take this over to the computer. The one thing we didn't talk about was this little guy. This actually does not, the SD card reader, it doesn't plug into the Pi. It actually plugs into your computer. Yeah. So we're going to run over to that computer and we're going to start downloading some software, getting that stuff downloaded so that we can actually start installing the operating system on this Raspberry Pi.
I guess you could say that software is the filling to make the pie delicious.
Sure, you're so cheesy. All right, we'll see you guys in just a minute.
All right, thanks, guys.
So we're back at the computer now, and we're ready to get this software installed, man.
Yeah, my favorite part.
Awesome. So the first thing we want to do is we want to go to raspberrypi.org to their download session. The link is above my head and also in the comments in the description below so that you can actually go to it yourself. Once you click on the link, you want to go to the NOOBS section and click on the download zip button.
Yeah, NOOBS is like training wheels for your software install process.
Yeah, so once you click on that, it's going to do a download. Now, it's going to take a few minutes. It's a fairly large file, right? So it's going to take a few minutes to download.
And we're getting that offline installer so that if you lose connectivity during the install, you don't get derailed or anything. That's why it's a bit longer to download.
Yeah, and so once you've got it downloaded, you want to go ahead and save that off into a safe location so that you can access it later because you'll be reloading your Pi more than once.
Yes. And while we're thinking about that or bringing that subject up, it's okay to reload your Pi when you're first learning how. It's not destructive to anything on the Pi itself. It won't harm the hardware or change any of the default settings or anything like that. But it is destructive to any settings or changes that you've made in the Pi itself. So when you're first learning, it's okay to reload the Pi if you put yourself in a corner or mess up some settings or change something you didn't know what you're doing. But later on, you're going to want to be mindful of reloading because you can blow away things that you've done on the Pi.
Yep, absolutely. So the next thing we want to do is we want to get the SD card software downloaded.
Yeah, right tool for the right job, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So SD Card Association website, which is above my head, and it's also down in the description. There's a link that you can click on. You want to go to that website, and then you'll see that there's two options. You got for Windows and for Mac. Okay, if you have a Windows machine, obviously download the Windows version. If you have a Mac, go there. Okay, so once you click on for Windows, you're going to get hit with a license agreement. And go ahead and read through that license agreement if you choose to do so, and click accept. And that will begin the download of the software. Okay, just like the Noob software, you want to go ahead and save that into a location that that you can get to later, because again, you're going to need it to reformat that SD card next time you reload Noobs. Once you've got it into that location, go ahead and start the setup process. Tim, can you walk us through that?
So basically the setup for that is pretty straightforward. It's like your traditional Windows setup wizard. You'd go next and accept the agreements again, and then you'd be asked where to do the install. At that point, you can just accept all the defaults if you like, but if you have a special setup that requires you to install the different places, you'd want to make those changes accordingly. And for our purposes, we're going to say leave the checkbox to launch it, so that way when you're done with the setup, it'll just take you straight away into the tool.
Yeah, and then so once the tool comes up, it's the SD card formatter tool, you'll have some options there. You have the select SD card option. And if you don't see your SD card in there, it's probably because you haven't taken it out of the SD card reader and put it out
of the Pi and put it into the reader.
Into the reader.
Yeah.
So you're going to need to. Sorry. Yeah, it's kind of weird, huh? I get tongue-tied sometimes.
Yes.
But you want to make sure that it's in the SD card reader, and then the software will then see it. If it does not see it, just hit the refresh button. It should recognize the SD card. If it doesn't recognize the SD card still, shut down the SD card formatter software and bring it back up, and it should recognize it.
When in doubt, reboot.
So there's a couple options, right, for formatting the SD card. There's a quick format and an overwrite.
Yes. So the quick, that just literally just hammers what's on there in the root directory and all the folders inside that root directory, and puts them back to a default state. But it doesn't authoritatively wipe every single thing from it. The overwrite format is all of the above, does the quick format, resets the volume label as well, but it also thoroughly checks every single sector by sector within the drive itself to make sure that it can write to it successfully.
So the next section is the volume label. The volume label is just a meaningful name for your hard disk that you're going to be installing the NOOBS software on.
Yeah, it's like a clue or a hint. This is the drive that I'm talking about.
Right.
By having the name.
So you could call it My Pi. You can call it whatever. Just try not to go over 8 characters or whatever.
Yeah. But something descriptive is helpful for you later.
Right.
Don't hate your past self.
So once you click the format button, you'll get a little box that shows up. It's a little message box that says formatting will erase the data on this card. It will erase your data.
Yes.
So if you click the format button and you click yes, it's gone.
So make sure that you don't have a lot of drives connected, or that you really know what drive letters are each drive in your system. If you've got multiple hard drives in your computer, you should know what drive letters are what. But if there's any doubt, double check, triple check. We don't want you to be the people that tell you that made you lose the data on one of your drives by formatting it.
Yes, absolutely. So once we've got the formatted SD card, we've got the NOOBS software downloaded, the next thing is to actually put NOOBS onto your SD card. And the way you do that is you go back to the directory where you saved the NOOBS zip file, and you want to right click that. And if you don't have 7-zip like what we're showing here, go get it.
Yeah, it's free.
It's free.
Yeah.
And it's awesome. Just
it works pretty well.
Just go get it.
Yeah.
And so you want to extract a file into the new directory or the new SD card that you just created. Now, to notice the picture. The NOOBS software is directly on the SD card. We don't want it to go into
a subfolder on that card.
onto a subfolder on that card.
Yes.
We want it directly into the card.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you go into G Drive or iDrive or whatever it is for your SD card, the very first thing you should see is defaults, OS, overlays, whatnot. So once you do that, you want to take the you want to eject it safely from your operating system, the SD card.
Mm-hmm.
You want to make sure the Pi is unplugged.
Yep.
Plug the SD card into your Pi. And then you want to plug the power back into your Raspberry Pi.
Commonly called booting it up. Whenever you hear the term boot up, that's what they're talking about. Powering it on and making it go through the process of loading the operating system.
The first thing that you're going to see is you're going to see a rainbow-looking rectangle screen on your monitor.
Yes.
That's a very good sign. If all you see is a black screen, chances are you need to go back and make sure that NOOBS is on the SD card properly. If rewatch the video and listen to how we're telling you not to put it into a subfolder. It needs to be directly on the SD card.
Yes. And then the next thing you're going to see is going to be that NOOBS shell that launches up, and it has several options at the top: install, edit, Wi-Fi, things like that. But the big thing there we're going to worry about are the key things: the Wi-Fi and what operating system you want to select.
Yeah. So when you click on the Wi-Fi button, you actually want to click on find your network in the Wi-Fi network box. Okay. If your network is not shown there, I'm not sure exactly what we would do about that. Maybe reboot the Pi. Make sure that you have the Pi 3 Model B that actually has the Wi-Fi connectivity.
Yes.
If not, if you still don't see it, go to the fallback. Plug up an Ethernet cable into the Ethernet port on your Pi, and let's go that route.
Yeah, I mean, if you have to move your Pi temporarily to close to a router to do that, just to get this initial setup done, that should be completely fine. I mean, obviously the Pi is pretty small. Hooking up to a monitor and moving a monitor might be challenging, but it's only temporary. Once you get the Pi set up, you don't need the network anymore for the short term. I mean, obviously you need something for the long term, but you can figure it out.
So select your network. And then go down to where it says password, and you want to go ahead and put in your password.
Now, sometimes you won't know that password, right? And we're also of the persuasion that we don't think anybody should be hacking, shouldn't be stealing Wi-Fi, shouldn't be doing anything like that. Mm-hmm. If you need Wi-Fi, but you don't have control over it, or somebody who you live with doesn't want to give you that password or anything like that, sometimes those routers have something called WPS. It'll be a little button on the front or the side of the Wi-Fi router that'll have some arrows going like back and forth or up and down. Mm. Typically, when you hit that button, for so many seconds after you've hit it, anything in that range can connect to Wi-Fi at that point in time. With the idea that if you can have physical access to the router, it's probably safe for you to use that network. So you could use a method like that. That way, nobody has to tell you the password, but you could use the Wi-Fi long enough just to finish the setup.
So after we have the network part figured out, whether we're hardwired or going wireless, we want to go ahead and make sure that we change our language down at the very bottom of the screen to the proper language. For us, it would be US, and the keyboard layout would be also US. And after that, we want to go ahead and select the Raspbian OS, and we want to go ahead and click the install button.
Yep. Now, I also want to bring up one point while we're here, John. If you look here also, this is one of the areas where Linux really stands apart. And this is neither here nor there for the software setup. But if you look at the buttons on the screen itself, you'll see some letters. Those letters are for accessibility. A lot of that kind of option is not available in other operating systems sometimes, but this one's very accessible friendly. So that if you have difficulty with the mouse or struggle using the mouse, you can use keyboard keys to do almost everything in this installer.
So you get a little warning box. You want to go ahead and click OK on that little warning box. Then the Raspberry Pi software is going to install. This is going to take about 20 to 25 minutes or so to complete that install. Once it does, it's going to reboot. And once it reboots, you should see the Raspberry Pi, 4 Raspberry Pis in the top, and see a bunch of OKs showing up on your screen. That means the Raspbian software is starting to load.
Yep.
Okay, that's a really good sign.
Yep.
Wait for it to reboot, and then you're going to land on the Raspberry Pi desktop. And congratulations, if it worked for you, you've got your Raspberry Pi software installed, ready to rock, ready to roll.
Yes.
And I think on the next episodes, we're going to talk about some configuration settings that we should make on the Raspberry Pi. If you had any problems connecting or configuring the software for Raspberry Pi, let us know in the comments below.
Yeah.
Don't forget to subscribe.
Always hit that bell.
Yep, hit that bell for be notified on future videos, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
Thanks for joining us.